So, so thank you.
No problem. Sorry, I just got tied up in a meeting.
No worries. We good to go? Are we recording?
I'm just letting Megan make sure that we're live streaming, and she will let us know, and then we're good to go.
Okay.
We are live.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Council Compensation Review Committee today. I'd like to welcome everybody. We acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa and the Ojibwe and the Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and let's get started. I think we're going to be reviewing the report. Some people had some comments on the report, so why don't we get started with that? Who wants to go first on the report? And again, I'd like to thank the staff for putting the report together for our review, the draft report. And I know we've got some comments, and there has been some comments passed along in the last couple of days via email. So hopefully we can capture those comments and move forward and have a conversation. So Chris, do you have some points that you'd like to make?
I will comment number 9 are names. I know Stephen's name was spelled incorrectly. You need an A at the end of his last name, and you also need a T at the end of my name. My name was spelled incorrectly. I think everybody else's was correct. So, item number 9.
Okay.
I think I noticed a typo on number 8 as well. I made a very quick note, but it's, let me just get in here. Or 18, sorry. It's there's just a single O there, and I think it's supposed to say of.
I saw that too, yes.
Okay.
Anything else?
Where would everybody like to start?
Do you want to start with your comments regarding the salary piece, Chris? Because I know you put some time and effort into that.
I mean, we've had some brief discussions in past meetings about like where we stand and all that sort of stuff. And I basically let everybody know that I was still just kind of working on the numbers. And what I wanted to do was just establish a baseline for the compensation, because we were also looking at the population of our comparators. So looking at the 6 different city and municipalities that we're looking at, what I did with the spreadsheet is I just put together a correlation between the mayor's salary and the councillor's salary in relation to the population. So when I extrapolated that information, I was able to get a actual citizen pays a certain dollar, if you want to call it that, towards the mayor's salary on a yearly basis. The average that it worked out to is about $1 to $1.02 per citizen. So when I looked at the overall data, it actually showed that Barrie, honestly, I was quite surprised. I was shocked, believe it or not, when I came to the conclusion that Barrie honestly has been not been compensating the mayor and the councillors anywhere near where they should be. Maybe that's because Barrie has rapidly grown in population over the number of years. But if we looked at comparatively the other municipalities that we're comparing with, I've noticed that they roughly pay on average $1 for every citizen goes to the mayor. And then it was something like 32 cents or something like that with regards to the councillors. So in light of that, believe it or not, my recommendation was, from a complete transparency and in correlation with the population, that our mayor and our council get a significant increase in pay. And in my spreadsheet as well, I illustrated that probably rolling it out over their 4-year tenure might be a little bit easier from a financial perspective to pay them out. So it was a bit shocking. I'm not sure who did the math on the paperwork that we got, this report, but it it's inaccurate if you were looking at it from a perspective of a transparency. It just, the report looked like it was just taking the average of the 6 municipalities that we were looking at, 7th being Barrie, but that wasn't taken into consideration. And it just simply said that the average of the 6 was lower than what our mayor was being paid, but that wasn't taken into account the population base. So that was one of the things that troubled me a little bit, was recognizing that our council, our city staff's been grossly underpaid for all of these years, surprisingly enough. I was shocked. So my recommendation in my spreadsheet looked like giving them quite a substantial increase. The only part that I didn't take into account was a cost of inflation, which is like 2.1%, which is the historical average across Canada for those 4 years. That's what I kind of came up with. Other things that I extrapolated off the original data that we were provided was the average amount of counselors amongst the comparators is 13 counselors per city. So Barrie's running at 11. Based on our population, we probably should have close to the 13. So Barrie's, been saving, not having to pay salaries for 2 additional counselors as well. On another side note, I also noticed in the data that, believe it or not, 4 out of the 6 comparators are not paying any kind of automobile expenses for their counselors. Only 2 of them are, and we're a 3rd one, and that's it. So given I understand that we have not given a raise for that expense to the mayor or to the counselors since 2006. 4 of our comparators are not paying them anything. So that's one thing to consider. I also saw that, in line with the mileage expense, that's reviewed every year. So I'm definitely on board with all of that. I don't see any issues there. They only get compensated on their mileage if they leave Barrie itself for that. So other than that, everything else all seemed to be okay. The pension stuff, we got clarification from Brian earlier on the added cost by moving over to the OMER side of things, which is fine. The counselors, if we do give them that significant raise, they'll definitely be able to afford towards their pension, because that was going to be, as Brian pointed out, less of an income, a net income, because they would have to now contribute part of their salary to their pension. So that's a positive. Just quickly going through some of my notes here. I think that's pretty much it. The deputy mayor was fine with the additional 2,500 for that. That was fine. There was one also part with the expense line, item number 40, when removing the $15,000 limit for the councillors and mayor for the council expense policy, I think it was called, referencing, taking it out as the limit. I've never been a big fan of having no limits, because it could get away from you from people's spendings. So I would want to talk or discuss that option of maybe having to raise the limit if we need to, or perform some sort of audit of the past, I don't know, hypothetically 5 years of what the expenses were incurred by these other functions that our council and mayor have had to go to. So if we took an average of what that was, maybe we need to just bump up the 15,000 to 20, I don't know. But the idea of having a no limit, I don't care for that too much from an auditing perspective. And the other component that we had discussed was with regards to the 50% of whatever remuneration gets paid to the counselors for their tenure on some other committee meetings and stuff to that rate, to that point. So I thought that was pretty much already had been decided on by us 5 of going forward with that, regardless of the administrative time frame and all of that. So I don't see that being that much more difficult to collect the funds from those various committees and then disseminating it 50% across everybody else. So that was another thing that we had going back and forth in an email. That's about it. I think that pretty much summarizes that. hopefully.
Great, thanks, Chris. Let's have a conversation about Chris's recommendations or findings and his presentation on the salary piece. Does anybody have any comments, first of all? Brandy Lee, did you have an opportunity to have a look at that?
I had a brief look at it. I haven't really delved deep into that just yet.
Okay, so I looked at that as well, and I thought it was insightful, Chris. Thank you for
scary.
bringing that forward, because I think it's true. If you look at, there's really only one that I would say that would be online with the city of Barrie, which I think would be Sudbury. We're not far from that population. And quite frankly, we'll probably get there at the end of this year,
Yeah.
I would imagine, or the next 18 months. So that seemed to be the one that was the most in line with the city of Barrie when it came to population. But I did also, once you pointed that out, it does look like we've just kind of added the 6 figures up and just divided it by 6 and came to it that way versus population, which I think is important. And as you pointed out too, those populations also have more counselors that are going to be supporting that larger population. And Barrie does have a large population, and it is a growing population. So 4 years from now, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, we could potentially have an increased population of 30,000 people, according to our growth projections. So I think we maybe, if we considered staying the status quo, as was suggested in the report, we may be shortchanging. And I think we need to take a step back and look at what that's going to look like and what that might look like if it's not, the full increase in that remuneration. Is it incremental, as Chris suggests? Is it a little lower than that suggestion? I think it's fair to step back and take a look at that, considering our where we're heading for population growth and where we've been, in a sense of not being at par or above with the other like size populations and municipalities, as well as you also pointed out, with the OMERS, if we're going to, and I wanted to ask this, Brian, is OMERS an all in or all out option? Do all the counselors have to do it or none?
Yes, correct. It's an all in or all out option.
Okay. Yeah. So if we put it on the table, then it's non-negotiable, right?
Correct.
Right. So, and that will be another $300 or $400 a month coming out. I mean, it is matched by the city. It's understandable. It is an investment. So I wanted to kind of take a step back and have a look at that. Any thoughts?
I mean, looking at it now, so I have it up right now. So I'm taking a look. I see what he's saying about the difference. I would say we could maybe look at an increase, but there are 2 other, you mentioned Sudbury, but also Thunder Bay is not too far off either. So I would say if we're going to do it, I would either do a tiered, this year and then next year, and then we do, a certain increases in a tiered manner, or we do sort of a moderate increase, because I see some are much higher. Peterborough, Brantford, they seem to be significantly higher, but we also want to be mindful that we're not jumping too fast too quickly, right? So I'm wondering if a tiered approach might be a good idea.
I think that's what I did illustrate, though, under the simplified tab. If you're looking at that, if we're looking at the average approach, I took the increase and I divided that by 4 years. So they would get an increase in 2023, then 2024, 2025, and then 2026 being the last year that they would get the increase until the next review. Yeah, you are absolutely right. It looks like Sudbury does pay, each citizen pays $1.06 towards their mayor based on their population of Sudbury of 166,000. So their mayor gets paid $176,781. So we have a population of 150,000 and our mayor gets paid 81 cents for every citizen for his salary to be 121,368. So out of all 7, Barrie is the lowest paid, yet we have, what was it, maybe the second highest population. Everybody else was lower. Even if we look at the smaller ones, let's say even Thunder Bay is not even too bad. They're still paying 87 cents, but obviously Thunder Bay is not growing at the same pace as what Barrie is either. So that's another thing we have to consider. Peterborough is paying $1.06, but I don't think Peterborough is at the same growth rate as Barrie either. So Brandy Lee, I echo exactly what you're saying, is that we should probably make the increase as an incremental increase over the years. I believe wholeheartedly on that. But when I extrapolated these numbers, you could see where I took the average salary for the population. It works out to $1.02. So even if we just took $1 at that face value, if Barrie is at 150,000, our mayor should be getting about 150,000. And then our councillors, our councillors are getting paid 26 cents from each citizen. So again, the average there is 32 cents. So there's 6 cents per citizen less. No, sorry, that's the average. We're less than the average. Sudbury does pay them a little bit less, and we are again the lowest out of the other 6 comparators that we're choosing. So I tried to make an average out of all of them, and the average came out to $1.02. And if I use the a geo mean, more or less a geometry mean, then it's a 101. So it doesn't really move the needle too much in that regard. So believe me, when I pulled these numbers together, I mean, the math doesn't lie. I was really, really, really shocked at how significant we would be paying our councillors low and our mayor low all these years. I was hoping that we'd be able to make cuts or no improvement whatsoever from a personal perspective. But when we have to look at it transparently like this and make an unbiased recommendation, this is what I come up with. I don't know.
Thanks, Chris.
I was shocked.
Brian, I saw your hand up first. Did you?
Yeah, just from one spreadsheet nerd to another, I think what Chris has done is really cool. But a great approach. I would just say that 6 data points is a really low number of data points. So it'd be interesting to see if you had more data points to understand if as a city gets larger, that on average the number per citizen reduces a little bit because there's economies of scale and all that kind of stuff. I think you're really onto something, Chris, but I'm not on the committee, so it's not up to me. But I'm just saying 6 data points is low, very low for a survey. So that's all I'm saying.
No, excellent point. I wish we had more, absolutely, to make the data more tight. But I guess some of our restrictions were there's tier 1s, there's tier 2 municipalities, there's all different sorts of things. I think when we originally started, we were starting to try and get about 10 or something like that, or 12 municipalities, and we ended up with 6. And I'm not sure if that's just because that's all we responded to us or what. But yeah, I mean, if we had more that were similar, that would be great. Even if they were smaller municipalities, I just want to see the correlation of what the mayor gets paid per citizen. Really, if they're all 90 cents, 95 cents to $1.05, we're within the range, right? But excellent point about as the as the city and municipality grows, do the citizens pay less? Not sure. I know we have a huge operating budget. I think it's the largest one out of them all. When I looked at the data from that other sheet, it was just massive compared to everybody else's. And I think that's just because the annual operating budget, yes, that wasn't it.
Mhm, mhm.
368 million. It's quite huge. And then the other one was the capital budget. That's the one I was referring to. The capital budget is more than double the highest, the next in line, which was Sudbury. We have a $253 million annual capital budget, and Sudbury's at 144 million. Peterborough's at 70 million, 86 million for Brantford. Thunder Bay 72 million, Kingston 70 million, almost 71 million. We've got 253. And if I'm going to like look into that just from a common sense perspective, I would have to probably attribute that a lot of that is just growth with Barrie annexing part of Innisfil, with the road construction, with new subdivisions going in, with the sewers and all that. We have a big annual capital budget for the growth. And again, that has to take into account our councillors and our mayor have to look after, you know, a very rapidly growing city.
Yeah,
You know?
that's true. Yeah. Brandy Lee, she's just had her hand up there. Thanks, Chris.
So the other thing I wanted to just sort of make note that as we're trying to match to the other cities and municipalities as well, as we start increasing, they're probably going to do the same too. So we want to, and then there's also the inflation rates and things like that we need to consider also, which has been exorbitant this year. So I don't know if we want to maybe account for that as well, right? Because 4 years from now, we might get them closer to the numbers today, but their numbers might also be different at that point as well. And are we actually going to bring them up enough to still keep them in alignment with what the average would be 4 years from now?
Mhm. Yeah, that was the only thing I didn't put into my numbers on the spreadsheet was the allocation of interest, or I'm sorry, the CPI, the inflationary rate. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Wendy, go ahead.
Thank you. A couple of things. We could try and reach out to get a couple more of those municipalities to see if we could just get the salary information for the mayor and council before we finalize the report. Because like Guelph is a very comparable municipality that we use in a lot of our comparisons, and we didn't get any information from them. So we could reach out to them just to even get, they might not have time to fill out the whole survey, but if the salary is what you're focused on right now, we could probably get the salary information fairly quickly, given that you're not making a lot of other changes to the policies that we have. Also, just with respect to the number of members of council, a lot of municipalities used to have downsized their councils in the last number of years. Like Toronto that was forced upon them. But when I used to work in Brampton, we used to have a council of 16. And even as the population grew, they reduced that council to now they have 11, a mayor and 10 members of council. And some of those members of council are dual purpose, where they sit on a regional council and a city council. And that's the other thing. I think most of these are single tier municipalities, but that's the other thing. I'll just have to double check. But if they're a dual tier municipal, like a lower tier, then maybe some of that council salary is attributed to them participating at both levels. But I think these are all single tier from my first glance. Yeah. So.
Thanks, Wendy. I also think too, Wendy, that the ones that you're talking about are full-time councils.
Yes, yeah, and it's not clear from this survey either whether they're full. I think the salary limits probably looks like they're more part-time, similar to us, where the mayor is probably the only full-time member of council.
Is that something else? It's not something that is on our scope, but the full-time council at some point, with the city of Barrie, is something that needs to be visited. I believe
that would be something that would be looked at. I guess we probably will be doing if the city grows a lot in the next couple of years, which we're anticipating.
Mm-hmm.
We would look at a ward boundary review. just to, even out the wards. It didn't really warrant it this term because we didn't grow as fast as we thought we were going to grow in the last 4 years, but development is very quickly happening now in Barrie. So I foresee us doing probably one before the 2026 election. And then that's when you look at like the scope of, okay, should a member, like, we kind of look at the role of the member of the council at that point over the term of, it would be the 2026 to 2030 term that we would be looking at.
Yeah, because I think, to keep in mind in the next 4 years, as we grow these 30,000 potential people that we're going to be adding, that means, these counselors are going to be taking on more and more responsibility and more weight, when it comes to managing people and committees in their ward. And there's going to be quite a bit of more work potentially, from that number. Right now, it's as it is, but it is growing and it is growing. You can't say it won't grow because we've got lots of building and growth going on. I think it might make sense to get 1 or 2 more. How does Chris, Brandy Lee, perhaps maybe Guelph, just getting a salary number from the
Sure.
mayor and the council from Guelph? And is there one more that?
I can go back to our original list and have
Okay.
a look at the municipalities that we were trying to survey, and we can just reach out to the remainder of those
Yeah,
ones.
and it's just a simple kind of, 1 or 2 questions and points around mayor salary and council salary, perhaps. Melissa?
St. Catherine's in there, was that one?
St. Catherine's?
I'd have to go back and look, but I think St. Catherine's was one of them. But we had 4 more that were on our list, and not having them in front of me, I can't recall. I know Guelph was one of them, but I can't remember the other 3 off the top of my head.
And Brian's just got a note that Oshawa and St. Catherine's around the same size. Melissa, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I can't remember if we must have got, I'm not sure if we got 2020 or 2021 information, but the 2020 information should be on their websites if we don't have anybody respond to us, because we have to do like an annual council remuneration report. Every municipality does. So if we want to get it quickly that way, that's an option.
It's public information, right?
Yeah.
I think Oakville
Okay.
might be another one that's close to us.
I just think we were trying to do as many single tier as we could, because we're single tier and Oakville is a lower tier.
I forgot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that would help for sure. So if we gather more data points for our comparative, and then we can compile the proposed increases, because I think it will impact, if we're giving them OMERS, which is not something they can turn down, then that automatically will be coming off their annual pay as well. So, but I think the recommendations on the benefits are really good. If we want to move on from the salary piece, I think we're, once we gather some more data, and then are we good to move on from that salary piece? Is everybody?
Yep.
Yeah. And then we can move forward on that. And I think we're in agreement with the benefit piece.
Yeah.
And that was 100% paid by the municipality, in line with the non-union. Is that right, Brian? With the same, I think.
So the union got 1% this year, but that was we're not sure if there would be further increases at this point yet.
Okay. I also noticed an actual figure of 2.5% for 2023. I wasn't sure where that came from.
I think that Steve was jumping in with a 2.5 annual increase as part of his, when he was discussing it. I don't think that 2.5 came from staff in particular. I thought the recommendation from the committee was just to be in alignment to whatever the non-union increase is every year for members of council, not a dedicated 2.5%, because it's not generally 2.5. It's been under 2% for the last couple of years.
Okay, because it is 2.5 in the document, right?
Yeah, we'll fix that.
Okay, yeah. Okay. And that was the annual increase. But I think we're in agreement. We need to get them up to a different base based on the data. Anything else from Chris and Brandy Lee on the document? I have a couple of points, but I wanted to make sure that you both had your input.
No, I think everything looked pretty good, and the OMERS clarification happened through email, so I think we're good there as well.
Good. Okay. I just wanted to clarify when it comes to the extra remuneration that the city bills the external organizations. I think Melissa put this piece together for the folks that sit on those committees or boards. And I know we initially talked about it being pretty insignificant money, and then we were able to look at the total, and sometimes it's, $2,200 or sometimes it's $3,500. And we wanted to be able to give that back into the council, because it just goes into general revenue right now, as far as I see. I believe it goes back into just general revenue. Right. And so I know that there was some issue raised about the administration of this 50% and that it would be cumbersome. And I wanted to clarify that, and because I know we've got it on our recommendation that we do this 50% back to the councillors, but I want to make sure that we're clear on how we're going to be doing that. So are we good to distribute that back, or at 50%, or is it still too cumbersome? We were going back and forth in the emails about how cumbersome it was going to be. So I just want to make sure that we're good at recommendation. Wendy?
I'll let Melissa jump in if she wants to at the end, but just to clarify, we don't charge the groups for the committee participation. It's a remuneration that they pay for, not just the members of council. Even though it goes to the city, they pay us for the city of Barrie to participate. We don't charge them. So it's the organization that organizes the remuneration, not us saying, oh, we want you to pay us like $1,000 for a member of council to sit on a committee. So I just wanted to put that out there as clarification. I'll let Melissa touch on the administration of it, because that's her area. I have an overall concern about this recommendation, and just because the members of council do not all participate on the same number of committees. Some participate on 6 and 7, some participate on 3. So I just think that the committee needs to be aware of that. So if they're giving this equal distribution of this money to members of council, that it's not going to be just, it may not be seen as fairly distributed, because one may participate on additional committees where somebody may not. So I just wanted to, and that was the point I brought across in email too.
Yeah, I remember you raising that before, Wendy. Yeah. Melissa, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Wendy said about kind of potential unfairness or like visibility into it. But yeah, from an administrative side, and I'm not sure if this would be done through accounts payable or through payroll in Brian's area. But I mean, it would take several hours of staff time, I guess. And it's just I mean, staff are very busy. We have tons of things to do. It's just like another thing on the list to remember to do each year kind of thing. And I think for the amount, if we want to give them, it would probably be like $200, $250 a year, maybe not even that much. I would just suggest we add it to the base salary, and then it's not dependent on people who goes to these meetings and who doesn't, and things like that.
Okay, that's fair. So I think if we're having the conversation around bringing the salaries up to in line with what we've suggested and what Chris has come up with in his analysis, that perhaps we forego that option in the recommendation and just include it in, or, you know, as part of the looking at the higher level of the base salary. Does that make more sense, Brian?
Sorry, just as I was thinking about this in terms of the dollar amount you're talking about, is like it's like if you would pay somebody to come into your house and find all the loose change in your house. By the time you finish paying them, you wouldn't be gaining anything from the loose change, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Good. Okay, so Chris Brandy-Lee, what's your thinking about this? If we take a different tact and say, okay, we get that there's a lot of commitment by some, maybe perhaps more than others, whatever that looks like optically, on their engagement at the committee level, whether it's a chair, which is a little more of a cumbersome role. It takes a little more time. If we're thinking about how we're going to be bringing them up to a certain base level, that would help or compensate for that committee time and sitting on board time that they're not paid for currently. What's the thought around that?
Hi, Kelly. I think it also ties in with item number 43, which was information related to the requirements associated with serving on the Barrie City Council. So if we extrapolated from that with possibly a record of employment, like almost every HR department does, provides for a job description of what's all involved. I'm not sure if Barrie even has that for the councillors, which is a record of employment, like a job description. So that ties in with an obligation from a councillor's perspective to sit on these various boards and participate. I look at the Barrie Council as a team, and it's a team effort. Some folks are some people on the team are gonna take part in these other meetings and sit on these other councils because they enjoy it, or because they have to. Regardless, though, some are going to get compensated. Barrie, the city of Barrie is going to get compensated for that Barrie teammate to sit there and participate. And some boards and some organizations won't be paying the city of Barrie whatsoever. So what my focus was is looking at it from a team perspective. All the money that comes in from all the revenue that comes into the city from their participation goes in one pot, into one hat, and half goes to the Barrie and half goes to the councillors, so that it's evenly spread from a team perspective, not an individual perspective, because I sit on 7 boards and those 7 boards pay $1,000 each, and City Barrie gets $7,000. That's nice, but you might sit on 4 boards and have no remuneration of the city of Barrie whatsoever. So or let's say 3. So there's going to be 10 councils that we're going to sit on, and only $7,000 comes in. Me being the one on all 7, because I really enjoy it, brings in revenue for everybody. But I shouldn't have the share of all that. Everybody as a team member should share in that participation. That's just my view. It's almost like working at a restaurant and getting the tips. Like we already brought it before, you kind of pool all your tips together and everybody goes home with an extra few bucks in the pocketbooks. From an administrative standpoint, looking at bookkeeping and all of that and record keeping, I don't see it being that cumbersome. I would find it more cumbersome from the accounting department to pick up some counselor's expense report at the end of every single month and go through every single receipt and have to do it that way. And as Brian said, looking for change. It's the same thing. it's nickel and diming. Here's a gas receipt. Here's a mileage receipt. Here's this, here's that. Here's a receipt for my hotel, or I had lunch with so-and-so in Bradford. I would find that more cumbersome from an accounting perspective and bookkeeping. Then at the end of the year, you tally it all up, you do a couple journal entries, and then it goes through payroll. Here you go. Here's your bonus. Thank you. That's, again, my perspective of looking at that. My 2 cents from the cheap seats.
Thanks, Chris. Brandy Lee, go ahead.
So from an HR perspective, I would say, so I agree with the having it in. It's almost like that statement of and other duties as assigned, right? Like it's kind of like that. If it's in the job description, that makes sense. However, with the analogy of the tip pooling, I mean, some places do, some places don't, but tips are usually given based on individual effort, right? So it's different if someone's a part of the committee, and that committee, I'm sorry, just reminded me of my meeting in 10 minutes here. It's different if someone is a part of a committee that doesn't have a remuneration tied to it, but then that's different from an individual just not partaking in a committee because they're not interested in doing so, right? So then it comes down to that person who's not partaking is getting sort of a benefit for other people's efforts. So I understand what you're saying about the team effort, but I think it depends on which way you look at it, right? Whether it's they do assist, but they don't get paid for it, versus they just choose not to. I would say this would almost be something that they'd have to take back to sort of more of the HR realm and decide, okay, so are they going to mandate that you have to be a part of X number of committees? Then we could equate that equally. So I'm not really sure how we want to handle it, but looking at it analytically like that, like I think that I don't think I agree that not everyone should have the equal amount to it, and unless we have it in a clause stating that the individuals who partake in committees are then included in that remuneration. But if you're not on a committee, then you wouldn't receive that. Like if we kind of maybe did it that way, I don't know if that's a possible calculation, but because I think not every counselor was on committees, right? So then those folks would be removed from the calculation.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Brandy Lee. Wendy, you got your hand up.
Oh, thank you. The committee, when the members of council are appointed to committees, it's not that they work with the mayor who, the elected, the mayor-elect, on which committees they are interested in, which committees they can actually attend, because frankly, some of them are during the day. And some members of council, because they're only part-time in their role as a member of council, they cannot participate in daytime committee meetings just because of their role, unless they switch their schedule around or whatever. But so we have to look at it from that perspective. It's the mayor working with the members of council on what committees they do participate in. It's not whether or not they won't but at the end of the day, a member of council may say, I only want to sit on 3 external committees. One may say, hey, I don't work, I can sit on 10 different committees. So you have to look at it from that perspective as well, because because these jobs are part-time, we can't expect a person running for council to give up their full-time position at another job, since this is only part-time. But they are aware, and we'll make them more aware, because we're going to update the candidate information, that there will be that, some of the committees do require daytime commitments. And so I just want to look at it from that perspective too. It's just that it's not because a member of council may not want to sit on committee. It's what they've worked out amongst themselves as a team and worked out with the mayor-elect at the beginning of the term, or changes that are made throughout the term, because we have made a lot of committee changes to who sits on what during the course of a term as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up. Thanks, Wendy. I think we need to be a little better at clearly defining roles and responsibilities with the candidate application package that we send out, expectations and roles. And these are what you're going to find. May not be the same for everybody because, as you said, people don't have time during the day because they're working. This is a list of the committees that you could potentially sit on, and these are the list of the external committees that you could potentially sit on. And part of your remuneration, which I think may tie nicely back in, if we're not taking this extra money that the city's getting, that is going into general revenue, as Wendy says, we don't invoice them, they pay us, but it has to get recorded somewhere, whether that's going into general revenue or potentially it could go right into to help offset the salary cost for the councillors. I don't know if that's something that's possible, but I think if we tie everything into one package that says, this is your remuneration based on your this job description, roles and responsibilities, could potentially be, you could sit on 6 committees, you could sit on 10, you could sit on 3. Just being a little clearer with the candidates about what they're getting into, and whether this potentially this many hours, and tying that into the base remuneration, which would be inclusive of sitting on X number of committees versus the crazy math that you have to do, to figure out who sat where, when, and how often, but this person was sick on this committee, so they don't get their $50 or whatever it is. I think it makes a lot more sense and makes it easier if we include it in their base and say, this is your base, and it's based on your little roles and responsibilities job description that they now have, and it's pretty clear on what it means to be a councillor for the city of Barrie and what the opportunities are. I also think we also need to define the deputy mayor piece, because I know we all agreed that deputy mayor, we wanted to give them more money, but I think it needs to be clear that every councillor has an opportunity to apply, whatever that means, and make application to be a deputy mayor, because it's more money as opposed to appoint. Wendy's shaking her head. Tell me more.
Because the mayor makes the recommendation to council on who the deputy mayor is.
Okay, I get that. But how can I as a councillor, and again, remember,
you can express your interest to the mayor, but it's not a specific application process. What happens like currently with what's happened the last couple of terms with Mayor Lehman, and this is the first year first term we've actually had a deputy mayor position. Members of council can express their interest. The mayor usually meets with the council-elect before they're sworn in on their committee interests, just to get to know them, because we had like 6 new councillors last term. So he meets with them, gets to know them, finds out what their committee interests are. And at that time, when they have their one-on-ones, a member of a council-elect could express their interest to be the deputy mayor. The last time the deputy mayors were selected, because we had 2, but now it's just deputy mayor Ward, because the mayor had selected the 2 most experienced members of council who had sat on council for the most number of years. So that's kind of one of the decision points that was used in selecting the deputy mayor. The criteria for selecting the deputy mayor is not part of the mandate of this committee. We can put some discussion points for future selection in the report if you want, but this committee cannot make recommendations to the selection of deputy mayor, because it is already a decision of council on how it is selected.
Okay, so I would like to, I feel strongly that if you have a position that you could benefit from, and you're in a lower position and you're interested in, expanding your work, elevating, like in any organization, how, you can do a bigger job, or, get better experience. I think it makes sense to have a more formalized process. And because we are recommending that the deputy mayor make more money, that's part of our recommendations for salary. So I'd like to see that there would be and I think we also did say that we wanted that as a recommendation, and I know it's not within our scope, that we would like to see that be a potentially elected position somewhere down the road. But in the interim, to have it more formalized, that, that says, everybody has an opportunity. So let them know that. If that's the case, Wendy, then we need to say whether that's in their roles and responsibilities or their information package that says, the deputy mayor role, if you're interested in that, just like you may be interested in a committee, you can let your interest know. That's all. I just want to make it clear that it's, people can show an interest, as you just said, but if they know that at the outset, that's all. As long as it's clear to them that, that they have an opportunity to say, hey, put me in the hat for that. Just like it's, hey, put me in the hat for this committee.
Okay.
And I think that's all. Yeah. I know we can't change it, but I think as a recommendation, because it is something that they could aspire to. Chris, go ahead.
I think regardless of the process of how the deputy mayor becomes the deputy mayor, as Wendy already pointed out, they've already selected how that process comes through fruition. I think our responsibility is matching up a compensation for the additional responsibilities that other deputy mayor has to perform. So I think our recommendation was $3,500 or $2,500 more,
25,
from
yeah.
5,000 to 7,500 more. Is that commensurate with the
Thanks, Brandy Lee.
responsibilities? Is that the reasonable amount? Is that the reasonable amount to receive for the responsibilities that the deputy mayor will have to step in? I think that's what we have to really understand, what the job responsibilities are, and is the $7,500 that we're recommending, or the $2,500 increase, commensurate with the efforts that the deputy mayor would have to take over those responsibilities. How the deputy mayor gets appointed and all that sort of stuff, as Wendy said, I don't think is really within our scope to figure that out.
I agree. Yeah.
It's just assigning a dollar amount to recognize the additional cost of living wages and all this other stuff, their responsibilities. It could be an additional to their expense account in mileage or in their car, or whatever the case may be. It may not be just salary wise. It could be something, a little bit of both, depending on what the responsibilities are. So for me, I'm a data guy. I like to see what additional responsibilities would a deputy mayor have to do, and what costs are attributed with doing that, to be able to justify an additional raise. That's all.
And I think Brandy Lee's gone. Wendy, do we have to?
We don't have quorum anymore.
Right.
So, okay. So what I would suggest is, I think we've got some idea, like where you guys are with your recommendations now, just based on the discussions. And you guys seem you're pleased with Brian's, with the health and benefits recommendations. So Brian's not available next Friday, but it seems like everybody else is available next Friday. So maybe what we'll do is we'll schedule a meeting next Friday afternoon to carry on our discussions, to make sure we get the recommendations nailed down as much as possible, like probably hopefully finalize the recommendations that you want to bring forward to general committee. And then what we will do is we'll try and get that additional salary information and circulate it to the committee in advance of the meeting, so we can nail down that salary recommendation you want to do. And then hopefully kind of complete going through the points of the report that you want beefed up or information added, and then we can work on that and recirculate it to the committee.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, so what we'll do is we'll send out a meeting invite for next Friday, same bat time, same bat channel, and we will go from there.
Sounds like a plan.
Motion to close the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
There's
No, it's
no
not.
motion. We lost quorum, so that we don't need
No. Just have a great weekend.
Yeah.
to. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.